Welcome, everybody. You're watching Know Your Education Rights Live. Me, Christina Laster, K 12 Policy and Legislation Ambassador here. And so glad that I could come and provide the legal basics about the Freedom of Information Act. Last time, if you're watching and if you didn't get a chance to catch that episode, definitely go back and learn the legal basics about FERPA. But this time we're going to be talking about the legal basics about the Freedom of Information Act, which is different in a lot of senses from the Family Education Privacy Act that I was talking about last week. So, anyway, you can see that you are in the right place at the right time, tuning in through Minnesota Parent Union. If we're watching from YouTube, definitely can give us a shout out in the chat. That way we'll know you're there. But let's go ahead and get this started as we go along the way in this presentation and in teaching you the legal basics. You can ask a question or offer, a statement, even, like I'm a little bit confused about what you just said. Can you repeat that? And I'll be paying attention to the chat, looking for that information so that I can make sure that I answer all the questions. So, what you can see here is a quote from John F. Kennedy in 1962. And this quote says, "A nation that is afraid to let its people judge the truth and falsehood in an open market is afraid of its people." And I thought that was a very fitting quote for tonight, talking about freedom of information and transparency and requesting records from government so they don't keep secrets. And so we'll be diving deeper into that. But I thought this was a very fitting quote for this topic. Now, I want you to be successful, right? Like, I can repeat these legal basics over and over and over again because I know them and I put them into practice, and I just continue to use them. And, coming in with the knowledge of I don't know everything, right? And so, and laws change, amendments happen, all kinds of stuff happen. And so you got to constantly be studious in order to secure and know your rights, right? And so I want you to be successful and I want you to be set up for maximum success. So during this time that you are in this legal basics presentation training, I want you to take notes, right? You might hear something for the first time. You might hear something that triggers another thought. You might be getting more information to add to your already existing database of information in your mind, and an idea may come up, right? While you're listening to this. And so take notes, avoid distractions as much as possible, fact check, right? Fact check what I offer. I typically try to use credible sources of information, especially when we're talking about law, policy, and code. You can that's pretty direct. You can go to the government websites or official legislature websites and get that information. I'm not going to go to a cookbook to find legislation, policy, and code, right? So fact check, ask questions. Again, the chat or the comment field, depending on where you're watching from, is utilized for that purpose. Ask those questions. And if you're just wanting a shout out, say, hey, I'm here and I'm paying attention and I'm watching, definitely put that in the chat or the comment field as well. All right. And then what I put here again is our process of understanding and in the way that we are able to process the information in our brain. Like, search for the information first. So I don't want to put research because this might be the first time that many of you have heard of this information, or the first time that you hear of some of this or have looked at it in policy, law, and code, right? So search for the information, inquire, right? The process of inquiry. When you receive information, you want to do that fact checking. You want to check on those credible sources of information, right? That studying. Apply the information. You've probably heard growing up, practice it until you master. Well, yeah, practice makes perfect. Practice till you master, right? Continue to apply this information because it can only remain a theory in your mind until you apply it and you fully understand the experience of how to use it, right? And then you can, after applying it and after understanding how to apply it, then go and teach other people, right? Who is your neighbor? Go to your neighbor, tell them to come and watch this and set them up for success too, because we all know a child in our community that we can help, even if there's people that don't have children. This is beneficial. We all know people that are needing a way to figure out how to get information or how to get records or whatever they need to do to get the information they need. So this is something that you can definitely share with another person. All right, and then put what you learn into direct action, right? That's a little bit different from the previous ones of search, inquire, study, apply, and research, and all of those things. What I'm saying to put into direct action means don't procrastinate, right? If you can think of a situation that you probably should utilize this information in, do it right away. When we procrastinate and we wait longer and typically walk away from something, then something else comes up, and that other thing that was at the priority top of our list kind of keeps getting pushed away, pushed to the side, and then finally you find that, weeks later it comes up like, oh man, I should have did that when I first thought about it. I totally forgot. Instead of doing that, when you have a thought to do this, which is hopefully during this time, right after, start to put it into direct action. When you learn the legal basics about the Freedom of Information Act, put them into direct action. Don't procrastinate. All right. And so I find that that's the best way to utilize information and be able to retain it and then grow in that information, and share it with others. Here is our policy and legislation board. And as you can see in this lesson, you will develop an understanding of how to use the United States statute and code, referred to in abbreviation form as U.S.C. So, anytime you see that, and we talked about this last time in more depth, U.S.C. means the United States Code, right? So you're going to see that statute and code in abbreviation form, and oftentimes even further down, you'll see 5 U.S.C. statute 552. So you'll see that, right? And that's what that abbreviation stands for. And typically, that's the formal way that you're also going to provide it if you're writing a letter. And so, just be mindful of that. But you will be developing a broader understanding of how to use the United States statute and code to advocate for your rights. All right. So let's talk about FOIA, right? What is it? The basic function, at the very basic, the function of the Freedom of Information Act is to ensure informed citizens, vital to the functioning of a democratic society, right? And so we're not here to argue about whether it's a constitutional republic or whatnot. This is what the Freedom of Information Act is defined as, and it is vital to the functioning of a democratic society. Okay. So that's just the basic definition, and you can take it at face value. And so then further, we see that the Freedom of Information Act, 5 U.S. Code, Section 552, sorry, I'm kind of tongue tied today, in the United States Federal Freedom of Information Act law that requires the full or partial disclosure of previously unreleased, or uncirculated information and documents controlled by the U.S. government, state, or other public authority upon request, right? So a lot of times people are saying, well, there's a lack of, transparency around some things government is doing. Well, have you asked for them under the Freedom of Information Act, right? Have they been released or circulated in another form, right? Because sometimes I found that just as I am going to FOIA something, I find out that someone else did, and that information they have either given to media or whatever, but that requires you to do that search, inquire, study, research, right? And so that helps me to avoid asking the same question from information that's already there, and I want to get to exactly what it is that I need that may not have already been released or circulated, or information um, that is pertaining to a particular situations that it applies to. So, I don't know if, about you, but a lot of people say this stuff is kind of boring, and I'm like, not really, because I get to see all the funny cartoons and drawings around policy law and politics and stuff. And so I thought I'd share some of those with you, so you can get a little laugh too during this time. We can actually just relate to a lot of these things, right? We see this one guy on the left, it's like, oh, we need more shovels, and this other one's on the right says we need more sunshine. Well, often this is called the sunshine law, right? And then you have the big secrecy in the back, and then to the right you see this man holding the paper, and on the paper it says freedom of information bill published, right? And then he says, I'm worried they're going to find out how little we really know. So those are the funny types of cartoons that I get to stay up looking at. Sometimes I'm just typing in a subject, right, around what I want to research. And all of these memes and cartoons come up, and I get a little kick out of that during my time of studying. And so I saw this one, and the people are on the ground protesting, and it's like transparency now, right? How many times have we said that? And someone's yelling from the building, tell them they have to file a FOIA for that. I thought that was hilarious too. Like, you got to file a Freedom of Information Act request for that. um and so, how many times have we done that again, like not really knowing how to directly request something, and what our rights are. And that's why we, are providing this training, so that you can better understand your rights. Is there anything worse than not being able to trust your own staff? This guy says on the left. And then on the right, he says, yes, not being able to trust your own government. And so on the paper, it says, inside news leak embarrasses the White House. And so I thought that that was pretty funny too. We've seen a lot of that over the past couple years. Like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff going on. And here is the last one that I'll share. And I want to demystify this process for y'all. Hey, Mr. Government official, what's going on under there? And that's the public, as you see, his shirt. And on the ground, all this other stuff is their money, the bill, law, policy. Trust me, you don't need to know. And he has the cloak of secrecy with a whole bunch of people underneath there. And so I thought that those were pretty funny. And again, I want to remind you of the beginning, what JFK did say in 1962, but add a little bit of context to what he said. And so we're not afraid to entrust the American people with unpleasant facts, foreign ideas, alien philosophies, and competitive values. For a nation that is afraid to let its people judge the truth and falsehood in an open market is afraid of its people, right? And so I want you to just think about that when you're looking at why things are not transparent, and coming from someone that was is a credible source. He was the president. That's a very strong statement. Okay, so we went through what is FOIA, and then really looking. Now we're going to start to dig in deeper, right? Looking at that actual statute, looking at the U.S. Code 5, Section 552, right? Public Information Agency rules, opinions, orders, and proceedings. And for Minnesota, that is going to be under a specific act. So we're going to look at it from the federal perspective, and then we're going to look at that state statute, right? All right, so let's begin the guided instruction. I will be putting these links inside of the comment field. If you're viewing from YouTube, I have to come back around and put those links in, but you will get them directly if you're viewing from any other platform. So I'm going to be putting those links into the comment field and you can look them up. As a matter of fact, I advise you, like, the best way to learn is to look at this while I'm going through it. And then you can go back later and try to look at some of the other information that's offered on that page, right? On the pages, there's going to be tons of resources that you can go and check out and find even templates, right? For some of the stuff you need and maybe some of the stuff that you don't need, but you don't know until you actually have an opportunity to go and look at it. So let me try to bring this other screen up here. Let's see, 1 second. And I do have tech support in the back just in case. Um, all right, so let's see. Shared screen. And here is a credible site. And then let me know if you guys can see this, or actually, if you cannot see this, it would be better to know that. So can you see the screen? I had to use, okay, someone sharing information. And yeah, I had to use the Freedom of Information Act to get information from the police and my daughter's death. I'm so sorry. Um, Very understood how this works from experiencing it through pain. True, right? A lot of times we will go through situations, and that is what catapults us into understanding our rights. And unfortunately, that's how things happen. I really send my condolences about your daughter. But this is one of the reasons why I try to advocate that we know our rights now, just in case something happens. Like, I really wouldn't want anything bad to happen to anyone, but really understanding your rights, so that when something happens, you're already informed and you know how to deal with situations. I'm always cringing when I'm watching these kind of like legal shows, and you see people that are getting arrested. They've been fully Mirandized, and then all of a sudden they're speaking, and I'm like, you have a right to an attorney, don't do that. And so it happens, and it's just one of those things where it makes you, really pay attention to what's happening and continue to pay attention. So here you can see, at the Legal Information Institute at Cornell Law School, you can go and search for definitions, right, or code or different things, right, and then you'll see up here specifically says U.S. Code Title 5, Part 1, Chapter 5, Subchapter 2, Section 552. So that's how you'll know we're in the right place. And I told you again that when you're referencing these things, you'll have to use this format as well. Okay, you'll use this format as well. All right. And so, is it big enough, tech support, or do I need to zoom in more? Okay, all good. All right, so I want you to note right here that we have A. Well, let's just start with A. This is direct guided instruction. Okay, I'm going to be breaking some of this down as we go along. Each agency shall make available to the public information as follows, right? So you're the public, you're the people, we the people, right? We should be able to have the information as follows. But what I want to do is go over the definition. Okay. So agency means, so you'll know who it applies to. Agency means each authority of the government of the United States, whether or not it is within or subject to review by another agency, but does not include Congress, the courts of the United States, the governments of the territories or possession of the United States, the government of the District of Columbia, DC, right? Or except as to the requirements of Section 552 of this title. Agencies composed of representatives of the parties or of representatives of organizations of the parties to the disputes determined by them, courts, martial, and military commissions, military authority exercised in the field in the time of war or in occupied territory, or H functions conferred by sections, and these are other sections of Title 12, subchapter 2 of Chapter 471 of Title 49. That's why it's important to begin to familiarize around the U.S. Code and the way that it's applied in states, because when you start to look at one, you're going to find other references, and you need to know what those are, right? Remember, there are 50 altogether, and so you'll start to have to familiarize yourself with which each one applies to. But I wanted to make that known to you so that you can start understanding more. All right, so those are the agencies we're talking about, and we're going to get into a little bit more about what applies to those agencies, exceptions to the rules that apply as well. There are 3 exceptions and I think 9 exemptions, and so we'll go through that when we're talking about Freedom of Information Act. Okay, so you know who the agencies are, and now you have each agency shall separately state and currently published in the Federal Register for the guidance of the public. Okay. So if you're wondering where to find this information, right? Descriptions of its central and field organization and established places at which the employees, and in case of a uniform service for whom, and the methods whereby the public may obtain information, make submittals or requests, or obtain decisions. I would advise everyone who is paying attention to this teaching right now to learn that you go to the Federal Register and see if your agencies in your state have done that, right? Like, have they published in the Federal Register? Or what is in the Federal Register? Maybe this is your first time even hearing about it. So I'm going to put this in the chat, and that way you will be able to go back and get this link. See that agency definition. Who does this apply to? Right? And let's just go over to the Federal Register so that you'll be able to see what that looks like. So I don't want you to get to the wrong place and be like, oh man, I don't know what I just landed on, and I probably gave my information or got my information, and I think I messed up. So let's go straight over to it, and you can see what that looks like. All right. So here is the Federal Register site, right? And look at, they have little fish and stuff down there. They're showing a video. There's really a lot of stuff that you will find on this site, but like they said, it's published in the Federal Register. Okay. So I'm gonna put this information in the chat, and definitely go and look at it later. But as you can see, you can browse right here, and there's, you see right there, agencies, right? What agency are you talking about? Well, they have agriculture, commerce, defense, education. Right there, you see it, folks, right? Education. Well, you need to come and check it out, find out what is in that area of public information that's been published. All right. And as you can see, there's more: energy, housing, health and human services, justice, labor, state. So if you're wondering, wow, well, government didn't share this information. Well, they did, but you had to go find it. And so I'm trying to help you be able to understand how to navigate the labyrinth, right? Even though it shouldn't feel like that, but it is. So here is what you do. And this is where you search for information. And every single thing that you read is probably going to refer to something else. And so this continues to spiral out. So I say, take your time with this. Go to the area or agency that you need, get the information that you look for, and don't get too caught up with looking at a whole bunch of stuff at one time. Like, have your plan that I am going to go in and I'm going to go to the education department, and I'm going to look at these 13 and these 6 comments, and I'm going to see exactly what is there. Okay. And make sure you pay attention to the dates, right? So these are related to documents published in the last 7 days. What is education department talking about, right? And these are related to documents with comments periods closing in the last 7 days. right? And so look at that. And then if you want to comment on any of them, start practicing by commenting, right? All right, so let's go back to the actual other tab. Okay. And then you will see um, that on B, the statements of general course and methods by which its functions are channeled and determined, including the nature and requirements of all formal and informal procedures, right? Rules, right? Substantive rules. All of those that are interpretations, general statements, or general policy or interpretations and general applicability formulated and adopted by the agency. So if they are coming up with new rules, agencies, and you're wondering where those are, well, it says right here each agency shall separately state and currently publish in the Federal Register for the guidance of the public what they're doing with you and your business, right? And here are the rules. All right. And so that is part of what the U.S. Code states. And then if we go down, here is where we get to our uh, responsibility in asking for this stuff. So at number 2, you see each agency, in accordance with published rules, shall make available for public inspection in an electronic format. And they have all of these areas of information. Okay. Final opinions, including concurring and dissenting opinions, as well as orders made in adjudication of cases. Those statements of policy and interpretation which have been adopted by the agency and are not published in the register. Okay. So let's see. Let me zoom in. I'm getting a message from tech support that I need to zoom in. All right. Administrative staff manuals and instructions to staff that affect a member of the public. I have asked for this before. And guess what, y'all? They didn't have it. And when they found one, it was like 20 years old. And I said, that's pretty outdated on how you're going to deal with us. And so let's talk about what that looks like to update your staff manuals and instructions on how you're going to deal with us. Right. Hey, that's a conversation some of you guys might want to have, right? Like, what is the staff manual and instructions to staff that affect the member of the public? Well, some of those are training manuals, some of them are not. You got to ask, right? Copies of all records, regardless of the form or format, and those that have been released to any person. So, one of the things that I found out is that the more I have FOIA'd agencies, the more when other people FOIA them, your name shows up because some people want to know how much information has been Freedom of Information Act requested. And guess what? If you're sending a FOIA request, other people are going to be able to have access to the fact that you're sending a request for information. So just be aware of that. That it does show in the records that other people are getting. All right. And so, as you can see, there's so much here. And again, I wanted to just introduce you to the US Code part of it so that you can at least be able to know that you're landing on the right place, you're reading the right thing. And yes, there's a lot of information with regards to this particular US Code section 552, but this is how we come across to the Freedom of Information Act. So I'm going to stop sharing and I am going to share your state's statute. Let's see. Oops. So when you go from the Freedom of Information Act, hold on one second. I see that I am not sharing my screen and I'm trying to fix that now. One second. Wow. Okay. I think I'm supposed to. Okay, I think I found out what happened. I don't know what happened. I'm sorry about that, y'all. share this screen. Okay, and then there's other like there are coalitions and organizations that share this type of stuff. And so if you want, when you're typing in, just make sure that they're up to date. Look at them. Look at the bottom of them for a date, or either if you click on the links, see right here at the bottom it says copyright 2017 to 2023 National Freedom of Information Coalition. So that lets you know, like, and you can look at the links on the side. That lets you know that the site is maintained and updated. And let me zoom in because I can tell that that's already small, right? But again, a lot of times when you go to these sites, they will have templates for you about your state's, you know, rights and how to request underneath. So as you can see, they have the Minnesota open meeting law, right? And let's talk about that. These are the FOIA laws in Minnesota. So here you have the Minnesota open meeting law that legislates the methods by which public meetings are conducted. Okay. So if you didn't know how to find that information, you can see it's right here in the statute, chapter 13D. The law states that any gathering of a public body for the transaction of business, the public's business, right? Talking about public institutions, government agencies, right? Is considered a meeting and is to be open. Anyone can file a suit against, okay, a public body if they feel that the public violated the Minnesota open meeting law. And so you definitely want to know, what does that mean, right? And then if you go down to the Minnesota Data Practices Act, it is a series of laws designed to guarantee that the public have access to public records of government bodies at all levels. Public records are defined as all data. You see, it says all, right? I'm going to highlight that. All data created, collected, received, maintained, or disseminated by any, you see that, right? There's two words, all and any government entity, regardless of its physical form, storage media, or conditions of use. Anyone may request public records, and they are also entitled to have the data explained to them if they don't understand. Okay, let me read that again. We, the people, anyone may request public records, and they are also entitled to have the data explained to them if they don't understand it. Okay, no statement of purpose is required, and the only restriction of the use of records is that if a commercial use is intended, the government agency may charge an additional fee. There is no response time specified in the Minnesota Data Practices Act. Okay. Now, one of the things that I found to be very irritating is that, they have these laws, and I want to inform you of this, because this is something that when you're thinking of, like, I need to request records specifically through FOIA, right? This is not your child's school records, right? You're requesting public information that can also be shared publicly, okay? And that has not already been previously released. Some of the school, like the school data, right? A lot of times people say, well, I can't get the school data. Well, that's public information. They can redact, I'm sorry, the names, right? To As long as no one's personally identifiable information or identities are being exposed in the data, that should be available to you. You want to know reading scores in your area, right? And they're not giving it to you. Well, FOIA it, okay? There's certain things that you might want to know that Testing. Can you hear me? Hello. Hello, can you hear me? All right. So I got a message saying that I was kicked out. I don't know how because this is, I control this room. So I'm really interested in knowing how. But anyway, I'm back. And so let's go back to the page where I was at. I kept getting a little notice in the left hand corner that I was kicked out of the browser out of StreamYard. And so that was really weird. So let me go ahead and share this page again. See. All right. Now, yeah, sometimes we have these glitches. And you know what? We just got to keep going. All right. So, as you can see right here, like I said, anyone may request this information and have it broken down to them to understand exactly what is being said. And so, let's go straight to the actual statute so that you can see exactly what they look like. All right. So here you can see that we're in the right place. And it says your state right there. Office of the Reviser of Statutes. At the top, you want to make sure that it is an official government website. Some sites mimic other sites and they're not right, but they're just fishing for information. And then definitely want to make sure that it's been updated or maintained and that it says the legislature right there on the top so you know you're in the right place. Okay. And so I'm going to drop this in the chat so that you will know exactly how to go and search for this information when you take your opportunity to do your research inquiry and all of that wonderful stuff. But you definitely want to look at this, right? I am not going to read all of it for you. I want you to go and take your time to look, right? It's talking about official records, how they're kept, the responsibility for records, and the delivery, right? Access to the public is the one you want to see right here. This is the one that you want to see, and again, click on it and it'll start taking you, but make sure that you don't actually, you check the numbers. So right here I'm checking the number and I know I'm in the right place, right? Just in case you click on something and something else comes up and you're like, whoa, this is not even in connection after you read half of it, right? So always check the numbers to make sure you're in the right place and under the right
labels Minnesota statutes, data practices, 1303, access to government data. Okay. And so you can look right here and it says on number 3, right? Request for access to data. So upon request to a responsible authority or designee, so that means you don't want to just give it to anybody that's hanging out in the public agency, right? Like, I say that in knowing that there are people that don't know who to give it to. And so you might walk up and say, "Oh, I can just leave this on the desk and somebody will get it." No, you need to find out who is responsible, the designee, who is responsible for the agency or public institution that you are trying to access records from, and give that request to them. Ask for a receipt. Okay. If you send your request via electronic email, then you're going to want to ask for confirmation if you don't automatically receive one. You can just put one in the email, make it a habit when you're requesting things or sending information through email that you put, please confirm receipt. Okay. And then there you have your receipt. Now, what I found to be very aggravating about some of the rules of the Freedom of Information Act and records request is the timeline, right? Um, People that want to get the information to you are going to be responsive and they're going to do it in a reasonable time. People that understand there is not a legal frame of time that in particular might be adjudicated, then they're just going to, go slow. They're going to go slow. And I found like sending those people multiple requests, right, is necessary. I've had to do that. And I had to do that with a particular public institution, a school district, 3 times before I could even get a partial information that I was asking for. And then they did also respond to me with a request for a fee payment to pay someone to collate the data that I was looking for 9 hours in order to get that back to me. So just be aware that sometimes those requests that you're giving, they will ask for you to pay a fee, which can be a reasonable fee. It just depends. If you're not watching from Minnesota, you need to look at the statute in your state to understand what that procedures and what that request looks like and what those fees potentially may be and who they can ask for a fee, right? But here is the information that is governing through the legislature in Minnesota. Okay, so I showed you again how to find. Let's go back and review that. I showed you how to find it at a credible source of information, Legal Information Institute, in the U.S. Code, public information, right? And then how to find the agencies in the Federal Register, so the information that they publicize, that they're supposed to publicize according to U.S. Code 5, Section 552A. Okay. Where to find that at in the Federal Register, right? And then all the way down to how to locate that information in your state, the rules around it, the processes and procedures, okay? The processes and procedures, right? And now if you also go to another source of information, which let me see if you guys can see, Ballotpedia, right? They will also give you information. Just make sure it's up to date. As you can see on the left right here, here is where it is. And then it says how to request public records. So you have 3 sources to refer to when you're looking for information, all credible. And right here, it'll show you that the purpose and use is under the Minnesota Data Practices Act. Okay. Now I want to take you to actually look at the, let me stop sharing right here. For those of you that say, hey, I might need a little bit more help looking for this information. Well, you know what? It's in, let's see, in state law library. So if you don't want to look up the Cornell website because it's red or whatever, and some people have an aversion to reading in red. I mean, really, colors do that to you, right? I sometimes get irritated if I see a lot of yellow on stuff like the one on the right hand side. You can also look this up at the Minnesota State Law Library. And you can confirm that it is Chapter 13, Government Data Practices. Okay. So that is information for you to be aware of. And if you want to, again, here's another source, and that is the U.S. code that I shared with you guys last time. You can find at gov.info, and you will be able to just scroll down and you can get it in the PDF, text, details, share. Right. I typically email these things to myself so I don't lose them. And it shows you all of the titles of U.S. code. Remember, I told you that there are 50. So you see all the way down for every title, you're going to be able to find it. Right. And since this is under Title 5, you'll be able to confirm that that's where it's at. Okay. So I just want you to know, like when you're looking for information and it's dealing with law, policies, and codes, you might not find everything in one place. You're going to have to be able to cross-reference and fact check and confirm that this is what it is. And so this is what I'm showing you how to do. And that's what you want to do when you're requesting any kind of official records to be released to you. You definitely want to know what you're requesting. You can't ask for things that the government doesn't have. And so let's go to the site that shows the actual exemptions and the exceptions to the rule. Okay. So whatever it is that you may be wanting to seek, right? This is outside of the FERPA request that we talked about last week, where that's your students' records, right? Your students' records and their personally identifiable information are protected under FERPA and cannot, be, exposed because FERPA protects that information, that personally identifiable information. FOIA is saying that the government cannot have secrets and we should be able to access information that is supposed to be given to the public. And so those are the differences when you're thinking about information. A lot of times people don't understand what that difference is. And so I definitely wanted to take some time to illustrate that to you. All right, let me go to share this. So you can type in your chat FOIA.gov, and guess what? It's going to take you. And it's going to take you to a video. Definitely watch that when you have a chance, right? The more that you know, the better, right? And learn how to make a request, okay? It's going to show you the statute. It's going to tell you some tips before, you request it. A lot of times I will go to multiple sources because I don't want necessarily to have the government tell me how to get information from the government. Some people may be like that. That's your preference. Do it how you need to, right? Watch this kind of show where you learn. As you can see in the right hand corner, this is the United States Department of Justice, and this one shows how you can create a request. This one shows data, overview, annual, quarterly, and some other information, right? If this is you're saying like, dang, she landed on the site, that's my jam, go for it. Just take your time and look through this stuff, right? But right here, as you can see, they're going to talk about the exemptions. And I want you to be aware that there are 9 exemptions and 3 exceptions to the FOIA rules or exclusions. We'll look at those next. So here are the 9 exemptions, okay? Let me zoom in. On what types of information you cannot request, okay? You cannot request, all right? And so the number 1 exemption, information that is classified to protect national security, okay? Information that is classified to protect national security. Exemption number 2, information related solely to the internal personnel rules and practices of an agency. So that's unlike what we saw in the U.S. Code about staffing manuals that have to be published and things that had to be published on the registrar, right? The federal registrar. These are slightly different. There's an exemption for information related to internal personnel rules and practices of an agency. Okay. Information that is prohibited from disclosure by another federal law. Okay. Check in and see what that means, right? What is that prohibited from disclosure information, right? Trade secrets. I mean, yeah, I don't think that people are going to be giving up their trade secrets or commercial or financial information that's confidential or privileged, right? I mean, that's, some of that is like, yeah, but you'd be surprised what people ask for. And you know what? I would ask for some of it too if I thought it was, if it's applicable. Hey, why not give it a shot, right? See what you can get, the information you can get. All right, and then you have here the number 5, privileged communications within or between agencies, including those protected by the, and we'll look down there. Sorry, there's a glossary too, so you can take your time to do that, to look at that. Deliberative process privilege, provided the records were created less than 25 years before the date on which they were requested. So this is a definitely one of those words that if you see a word like that, you're going to want to look it up in the glossary or Google it and find out what that means, right? If it's not in the glossary. Attorney work product privilege, attorney client privilege. Well, thankful for that, right? At least we know that attorney client privilege has an exemption. 6, information that if disclosed would invade another individual's personal privacy. Okay. It would invade another individual's personal privacy. Okay. Information compiled for law enforcement purposes. So a lot of people, this is the exemption that they really don't understand. Like, you try to FOIA information, but law enforcement has exemption, right? For information compiled for the purposes of, could be reasonably expected to interfere with enforcement proceedings, would deprive a person of the right of a fair trial or an impartial adjudication, right? All of those reasons why they can deny in under this exemption are right there. And then 8 is the information that concerns the supervision of financial institutions. I would love to get my hands on this data, right? And for those of you that are feeling the same thing, there was a congressional hearing on the bank, so you can go and look at that. And a lot of questions that you might have be thinking about were asked during that congressional hearing. So definitely look that up on YouTube University when you have a chance. All right, and then geological information on wells. Interesting, right? Interesting. So here you have the exclusion, right? So there are 3 narrow categories of law enforcement and national security records. And so you see where it gives the exclusion, protects the existence of an ongoing criminal law enforcement investigation. So most of these are really dealing with law enforcement intelligence. The 3rd exclusion is limited to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and protects the existence of foreign intelligence. So you're definitely not going to get the counterintelligence information from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But we did see that after years and years have passed about, certain things, the CIA did release them, or FBI did release certain information that had previously been classified. So, information as it ages, if you're looking for it, and we don't want to wait that long though, right? For the records we need right now, just know that these are the exclusions and exemptions. And go back, like I said, to this site. Let me put it in the chat. I was having some minor tech issues, and so I might have missed a couple of the links. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop them all in right now one more time to make sure that you guys have them. All right. So I want to know if you have any questions. I'm going to pause for a minute while I'm dropping these in. And if you do, go ahead and ask your question, because before we end, I want to make sure that you see the sample FERPA request and you have access to understanding how to even start to file one of those, depending on the information that you might need. So these are the links. When you see me switch the page, those are the links that I am currently dropping into the chat. So you'll have all of these for your viewing availability. I don't want you to walk away from here and say, "Wow, this is pretty complicated." No, remember, this takes practice, right? Like I didn't just stumble upon FERPA and FOIA and then the next day I was an expert at it, right? No, it didn't happen that way. I had to, first of all, understand the way that I needed to put the requests in. And I messed up along the way, right? Like there's some times where agencies said, we don't have that information. And so knowing that they can't make up information and give you information that they don't have, I had to go back and resubmit. And it was during the mistakes that I understood how to get it right? Where I started to look up more to in order to be able to get it right. And I watched a couple videos and I read it again and I said, "Oh, here's some sample information that I could use to be able to request this." Through the FOIA process or through the FERPA process, I got it. And so just know that it's through the mistakes that we often learn how to get it right. So do not avoid direct action. Don't procrastinate. Lean into what you have learned during this process. Okay. And that should be all of the links that are in the chat. And seeing that I have no questions about this, let me take you to the template so you can see an example. Okay. Sure you hear me clicking. All right, let's go. And here we're back at this website. All right. Uh-oh, someone's outside crying. All right. So as you can see right here, there is a simple template sample request, right? And so you see that you're going to put your name, your street address, city, state, zip code, date, okay? Who are you requesting records from and who is that designated person, right? Is it the right person? Like, don't give your request to the wrong person. It can take longer, or it can be sent back to you and they can just simply say like, we're not the holders of the records, and then that would find out beforehand who is the person that you need to submit the FOIA request to. A lot of agencies have a designated FOIA person, depends on the size, right? So that they are fulfilling these requests, right? And definitely you're going to put the name, the address, and then you're just going to, make it simple. Dear, custodian of the records or whoever it is, right? And you always would like to say the law that you're referring to under the Minnesota Data Practices Act, Section 1301 et sequence, right? I am requesting an opportunity to inspect or obtain copies of public records. Now, here is where you're going to describe the records or information sought with enough detail for the public agency to respond. Be, I would say, very specific, right? As specific as your knowledge of the available records will allow. But it is more important to describe the information you are seeking. Now, if you don't get that part right, your FOIA request can be rejected because they can say they don't have what you're seeking. So you gotta be specific. Make sure you know that they, would be, the people that have the records. Like, I'm not gonna ask the agency of Health and Human Services, right, to give me, housing stuff, right? That's a whole different department, right? I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm going to go straight to the departments that we saw in the Federal Register. Those are separate entities. You got to make sure that you're going to the right agency and requesting the right information, and that information is something that you hope they have, but that's detailed request with as much knowledge as you have, to be specific is what's going to help you, because they can get rejected, right? And they can get rejected on the basis of we don't have that information and they can't make up information. Okay. And then also make sure you put a time frame. Like there's times where I have put in a series of like, well, 5 year period of time, and the agency has come back and said, that's a lot for us to try to collate. Is it okay if we give you the last 3 years? That's reasonable, unless it's not, right? Like, unless you specifically need those years in a sequence of information, like 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? Then you can't, you can say no, I'm sorry, and then if you say no, I'm sorry, I need all of those years, what they might do, and what's happened to me, is that they'll say, well, can I have more time to be able to get these records to you, right? And I'm like, yeah, sure. How much does that time look like before we agree to the more time, thing? And so that's something that, I feel like is workable, is reasonable, right? It's within reason to come back and say, these are an extensive amount of records, and I don't want them to deny my request. And so I rather than say this is a lot, can we narrow it down even further? So just be aware of that. But to avoid that, you want to be as specific as possible. Okay. Now, if there are any fees for searching or copying these records, please inform me if the cost will exceed, right? And then sometimes people are able to ask for a fee waiver. I am not able to afford a fee for paying for this public information. Can you please grant me a fee waiver? Now, it's very important to request that fee waiver in advance, because some agencies have to get approval to grant you a fee waiver, and that might hinder the process of you receiving the records, because this might be a totally different form that you have to fill out for a waiver. And just so you know, ask it up front. Okay, if you can't afford the records but you need them, don't be ashamed to ask for a fee waiver, or to say, what, I can pay $25 for the records, that's all I got. And so don't, let me know if it exceeds that cost. But it says in the second sentence, however, I would also like to request a waiver of all fees, in that the disclosure of the requested information is in the public interest and will contribute significantly to the public's understanding of. Okay, that's where you want to give that description, that detail. Here you can identify yourself as a representative of the news media, if applicable. If you're an activist, I'm a community activist, and it's in the public's, interest that we have this information, so that people are fully informed and are able to make decisions about, whatever it may be. Okay. And state that your request is related to the purpose and intent by which you need it to share. Okay. This information is not being sought for commercial purposes, right? Remember, that was a part of U.S. code. You can't seek the information in certain circumstances for commercial purposes. Okay. And then here you see the final sentence. This is a pretty straightforward request, right? You don't have to talk about, well, my neighbor told me this, and so I want a FOIA of the information. No, that's not. I mean, you just put a straightforward request. I would request a prompt response to this request. If you expect a significant delay in responding to or in fulfilling this request, please contact me with information about when I might expect copies or the ability to inspect the requested records, right? And so this information is a lot. It's very useful. You have to begin to lean in to these processes, utilize what you learn, go back if you missed a part, ask me the question if you just aren't clear about what it is that you're doing. But whatever you do, take action. Okay, take action. Remember, I have said, if you have a hypothesis or a theory, that could be falsified, that could be true or not true until you prove that, right? So theory is a hypothesis about something that may or may not be true, that is falsifiable. Knowledge are those things that have been shown to be true. Theoretical learning is what the knowledge is about, and the practical application is how the knowledge learned needs to be implemented in certain real life situations. Some of you are in real life situations right now, and you need to go over there and take that template that I just showed you, and create a request to get some information. We saw the person at the beginning of the meeting say what happened to her and when she had to learn about FOIA real quick, right? And so the mode of practical application, along with theory, gives everyone a clear expectation about those facts. Okay, about the facts. Take action, right? You've been watching Know Your Education Rights with me, Christina Laster. I will see you at the same time next week where we will dive in deeper to some policy, code, and legislation so that you can be fully informed and know your education rights. See you next time. Share this information. Bye bye.